Let's begin with the most fundamental idea of all. Before you can ever hope to stop being angered or disturbed by others, you have to master your own inner world. Everything else, the words people say, the events that unfold around you, the noise of daily life, those are only surface ripples. The real storm, the real chaos happens inside. And if you can learn to quiet that, to direct your awareness instead of being dragged by it, then no one and nothing outside you can truly control your peace. Most people live in a kind of automatic reactivity. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and before they can even think, they're furious. Someone offers criticism, and instantly the mind feels wounded, defensive. It's as if our emotions have a life of their own, rising and falling like waves that we're forced to ride. But what if that isn't the only way to live? What if you could notice the anger before it becomes you, see it, name it, and decide whether to engage with it or not? That's where mastery begins, in the observation of emotion. The moment you can observe an emotion, you're no longer entirely inside it. Think of it like standing in the rain instead of being swept away by a flood. You're still aware of the feeling. You can sense it fully, but you are not lost in it. This simple shift from reaction to awareness is the first step toward invulnerability. Philosophers from the Stoics to the Buddhists have all spoken about this same truth in their own ways. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The Buddha taught that freedom arises not from controlling what happens, but from controlling how the mind meets what happens. In modern psychology, this is echoed in the practice of mindfulness, which is nothing more mystical than the ability to pause, to insert awareness between stimulus and response. That pause is everything. Between what happens and how you react lies a moment of infinite choice. If you miss it, you fall back into habit and conditioning. If you catch it, you reclaim your freedom. You can take a breath. You can decide not to speak or to speak differently. You can allow the feeling to rise and pass without adding a story to it. And in that instant, the power of others over you dissolves. But this is not achieved through suppression. Suppression is just repression wearing a calm mask. It doesn't make you peaceful. It makes you numb. Mastery is different. It's not about denying emotion. It's about understanding it. When anger arises, instead of judging it or indulging it, you study it, you trace its roots. You ask, what is this really about? What expectation, what insecurity, what fear is hiding underneath? You treat your emotional life as an inner laboratory where every reaction becomes data. Over time, this practice rewires your entire relationship with the world. You stop being thrown around by circumstances. You stop taking things personally. You begin to sense that peace is not something given to you by others' good behavior. It's something you generate through understanding. And when you start living from that center, people feel it. They sense that you're not easily disturbed, and paradoxically, they treat you with greater respect. Calmness becomes its own form of influence. So mastering your inner world isn't an escape from reality. It's a return to the only part of reality you ever truly control. It's the quiet power of knowing that your mood, your state, your serenity are not dictated by anyone else's actions. The world can shout, but you choose whether to echo the noise or hold your silence. And when you learn to hold that silence, not as avoidance, but as presence, you discover something extraordinary. Peace was never something to be found outside you. It was always the space between your thoughts, waiting to be noticed. Once you begin to master your inner world, the next great shift comes in how you interpret the outer one, how you perceive and assign meaning to other people's behavior. This is where most of our emotional suffering begins, not in what others do, but in what we believe their actions mean. Someone ignores you, and instantly the mind says, they don't respect me. Someone disagrees with you, and the story appears they're trying to undermine me. We don't just see events, we create interpretations. And then we get angry, not at the event itself, but at our own story about it. When you start to see that distinction clearly, you begin to free yourself from one of the most exhausting habits of human life, taking things personally. Think about it. Almost everything that bothers you about another person is a reflection of your own assumptions. You think they should know better. They should behave differently. They should recognize your effort or speak to you with more care. But in truth, people don't act according to your internal rule book. They act according to theirs. And their rule book is written by their upbringing, their pain, their fears, their conditioning. It has almost nothing to do with you. That realization isn't cold or detached. It's liberating. It allows you to see people with a kind of compassionate clarity. When someone lashes out, it's not an attack on your worth. It's a revelation of their state. Anger, arrogance, rudeness, these are simply the visible symptoms of invisible struggles. You don't have to excuse bad behavior, but you also don't have to absorb it. You can let it pass through you, understanding that the behavior says everything about them and almost nothing about you. Psychologically, this shift is profound, because when you stop interpreting other people's moods and mistakes as verdicts on your value, you reclaim your emotional autonomy. You begin to live with what philosophers might call the neutral mind, a mind that observes reality as it is before coating it with layers of narrative. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you feel without being deceived by your own interpretations. In practical terms, this change requires vigilance. You have to start catching yourself in the act. Notice when your mind starts weaving a story, she must be ignoring me, or he's trying to make me look bad. Pause and ask, do I know that's true, or is that just my interpretation? Most of the time you'll find it's the latter. The event itself is neutral. It's your meaning making that creates the charge. And the moment you see that clearly, the charge begins to dissolve. Philosophically, this is the essence of detachment, not indifference, but discernment. Detachment means refusing to let your peace depend on someone else's behavior. It's choosing to remain rooted in understanding rather than tossed around by assumption. In this sense, you become like a clear mirror. You reflect what's there, but you don't hold on to it. A mirror doesn't get angry at the image it shows. It simply reflects and lets go. And when you begin to live this way, something fascinating happens. You become untriggerable. Not because life stops challenging you, but because you stop granting others the authority to define how you feel. Your peace is no longer hostage to approval, attention, or agreement. You see people not as threats to your calm, but as reflections of the universal human condition. Each person fighting their own unseen battle. Each word or action, a ripple from their own internal storm. From this perspective, even conflict becomes an opportunity for understanding. Every difficult person becomes a mirror, showing you where your own interpretations still hold power over you. Every insult becomes a test of how deeply you've rooted yourself in truth. You start to thank those moments because they reveal the edges of your growth. And that's the turning point. When you no longer fear being bothered, because every encounter, pleasant or unpleasant, becomes part of your refinement. You stop asking, why are they like that? And start asking, what does my reaction reveal about me? That shift alone can transform every relationship you have, from reactive and defensive to centered and wise. So the next time someone irritates you, resist the urge to analyze them. Instead, observe the meaning your mind is creating and question it, because in that questioning, you regain your freedom. Once you begin to understand that other people's behavior is not a reflection of your worth, the next step is learning how to protect your peace without closing your heart. This is where emotional boundaries come in, not as rigid walls that separate you from others, but as invisible lines that define where you end and the world begins. Boundaries are not barriers. They are expressions of self-respect. They tell others, and more importantly yourself, how you choose to engage with the world. Many people misunderstand boundaries. They think being unbothered means withdrawing completely, becoming stoic or unreachable. But detachment doesn't mean disconnection. You can be deeply present, even compassionate, while remaining internally untouched by another person's chaos. The goal is not to harden yourself, it's to strengthen yourself, to cultivate the kind of inner structure that allows love and empathy to flow freely without being contaminated by negativity. Think of it this way. If you're constantly absorbing everyone's emotions, you're not being kind, you're being unguarded. Empathy without boundaries becomes self-destruction. The moment you take on the emotional burden of everyone around you, you lose your center. You become reactive, drained, and resentful. Boundaries then are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of wisdom. They create the necessary distance for you to act consciously instead of compulsively. In practice, emotional boundaries look subtle. They don't always require words. Sometimes they're as simple as choosing silence over argument, walking away instead of explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, or deciding that you don't have to attend every emotional conflict you're invited to. The mature mind doesn't need to prove its peace. It simply maintains it. Psychologically, boundaries are an extension of self-awareness. When you know your limits, what drains you, what triggers you, what nourishes you, you can design your emotional environment with precision. You can decide how much time to spend in certain conversations, what kinds of people you allow close, what kinds of energy you no longer accommodate. It's not control, it's self-stewardship. You're responsible for the atmosphere of your inner world, and boundaries are how you preserve that atmosphere. Philosophically, this speaks to one of the oldest truths in human thought. Freedom is not the absence of limitation, but the right relationship to limitation. The Stoics understood this. They believed that to live well is to live within the circle of what is truly yours to control, your thoughts, your actions, your choices, and to release the rest. Boundaries are that circle drawn in practice. They are your way of saying, this is where my responsibility ends and life's mystery begins. When you live by that principle, frustration becomes rare. You stop fighting battles that aren't yours to fight. But let's be honest, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, especially if you've been conditioned to equate kindness with compliance. You might worry that you're being cold or unfeeling. Yet real kindness has structure. It's not about saying yes to everything. It's about saying yes to the right things. When you set boundaries, you're not rejecting others. You're respecting yourself. And that respect allows you to show up with genuine calmness and strength instead of forced tolerance. You'll notice that once your boundaries are in place, the world responds differently. People begin to mirror the energy you project. Those who thrive on conflict may drift away, while those drawn to stability and depth will move closer. You stop being magnetized to chaos because you no longer resonate with it. Your inner space becomes like clear water, still, reflective, and undisturbed, and only those who value that stillness will remain. The irony is that the stronger your boundaries become, the more open-hearted you can be. Because you no longer fear being overwhelmed, you can engage fully, knowing you have the inner strength to remain balanced. That's the quiet confidence of a person who cannot be easily shaken, not because they've isolated themselves, but because they've anchored themselves. By the time you've learned to master your inner world, to reinterpret the behavior of others, and to protect your peace through healthy boundaries, you begin to see something remarkable. The very moments that used to trigger you now start to teach you. The people who once annoyed or angered you no longer appear as obstacles. They become mirrors, revealing what still needs to be understood within yourself. This is the art of emotional alchemy, transforming irritation into insight, turning every disturbance into a doorway toward greater mastery. Think about it. Every time you feel anger rise, every time someone gets under your skin, what's really happening? A part of you that has not yet been examined is being touched. A buried insecurity, an unhealed expectation, a need for control. Something within is being illuminated by the friction of interaction. If you meet that moment unconsciously, you'll project blame outward. You'll say, they made me feel this way. But if you meet it consciously, you realize the situation is offering you feedback about your own inner landscape. The other person becomes a messenger, and the emotion becomes the message. Most people spend their lives running from discomfort. They avoid conflict, suppress frustration, or distract